Hello, everyone. For those of you who were not here for last week's lesson on autism spectrum disorder and ABA therapy, my name is Anitra, and I will be your instructor for today's lesson, as well as the lessons for the next 2 weeks. For today's lesson, we are going to learn about the common triggers associated with maladaptive behavior in students with ASD. They have a lot of common components which interfere with effective learning. So recognizing these factors is essential to the intervention process, which we will be talking about in a later session. Okay, so first I wanted to go over some stats and other information before we get started. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll get started on that. Okay, so let's start with some stats. So 37% of children with ASD display aggressive behaviors such as kicking, biting, pinching, and others. Self-injurious behaviors such as headbanging, hitting oneself is present in almost 1/3 of children with ASD. And 70.9% of children with ASD have experienced a period of severe tantrums, 60% of them on a daily basis. And lastly, 1/3 of principals believe that their teachers are not well prepared to maintain order in the classroom in regard to students with maladaptive behaviors. So as we can see from these stats, behavioral interventions with children diagnosed with ASD is a necessary step in helping to create a more effective learning environment for the classroom and as a whole and for the student. And additionally, behavioral interventions can facilitate a better quality of communication skills for students living with ASD who are struggling with maladaptive behaviors within a classroom setting. So we're going to move forward and look at some maladaptive behaviors, triggers for those maladaptive behaviors, as well as the displayed behavior based on those triggers. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you again, so we can look at the slides for that. And feel free to follow along with the notes that were provided, with the slide notes that were provided, and take additional notes if necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again. Let's move on to types of maladaptive behavior. So there are 5 main types of maladaptive behavior displayed by those with ASD are stereotypy, escape, self-injurious, tantrums, and aggression. Stereotypical behavior is defined as a repetitive movement of the body or objects. It can involve any of the sensory pathways. Behaviors may be verbal or nonverbal, fine or gross motor oriented, as well as simple or complex. Common examples of the stereotypy are like hand flapping, body rocking, sniffing, and toe walking, like tiptoeing. Stereotypy occupies a significant proportion of the behavioral repertoires for children with autism. Therefore, many researchers and clinicians consider it an important point for behavior to target for behavioral interventions. Escaping a demand is a strong motivator for maladaptive behavior. Children don't want to do something in general, they'll find a way to get out of it. But you typically hear the escape maladaptive behavior is usually because they're trying to get away from a task that they don't want to do. which could result in tantrums as well. So children with ASD may not have the appropriate way to express themselves or to say they need to request something or say they need a break. So a lot of times that will manifest in a tantrum or some other sort of maladaptive behavior. Self-injurious behavior is any behavior that can cause tissue damage with such as bruises, reddening of the skin, open sores. Example of displayed self-injurious behavior would be biting, if they're biting themselves or scratching their hands, opening up old wounds, things like that repeatedly. The causality for these type of behaviors and the theories for them include communication deficit, medical issues such as like ear infections, and regulation of sensory stimulation. And 38% of self-injurious behaviors is used for to escape demands. Tantrum behavior is typically defined as a combination of 2 or more maladaptive behaviors, such as screaming, aggression, crying, SIB, self-injurious behavior. At the point of tantrum, however, the student usually is at crisis level, which it can be dangerous for both the student and the helping professional in some cases. Lastly, aggression. It's an act of violence towards another individual or an object, throwing things. This includes hitting, biting, pushing, grabbing, those type things. Typically, this behavior is displayed when there is lack of communication or an inability to communicate effectively. Okay, so we're going to continue on with our slides. The next thing we just spoke about the maladaptive behaviors. Now we're going to go over some triggers. But first, let's define triggers. So a trigger is a thought about a situation that leads to an inappropriate response to that situation. However, it is not the situation itself or the feeling behind it that's the problem. Rather, what the child says to themselves about the situation that causes the problem. For children on the spectrum, generally the triggers could be words, images, sounds are very popular. That signal danger for them or disruption in their day or in what the activity that they're doing, or feelings or disrupting their feelings of security and safety. So those are the definition for a trigger. Now we can go over some, let's go over some types of triggers associated with maladaptive behavior. So the types of triggers, so let me get my notes together, that are associated with maladaptive behavior. So we went over earlier, so stereotyping triggers. These are usually sensory overload, lack of control over the environment. For escape triggers, it's usually inability to communicate, which is very common. Frustration, inability to communicate stress, not just what they want or whatever, but that they're having some kind of feeling inside stress that they're not able to communicate. Self-injurious triggers usually is that hypersensitivity to sound or sometimes seeking of internal pleasure. Also, along with that could be anger, frustration, which moves on to tantrums. Tantrums triggers usually are sensory overload, especially when they're placed in an environment where there's like sounds or things going on. Anxiety, frustration, exhaustion, definitely exhaustion, as we know, working with children of all ages, basically with all different kinds of backgrounds. Usually exhaustion leads to some kind of breakdown. So, and then there's aggression. Aggression triggers usually just painful sensory stimuli, anger, frustration, anxiety, exhaustion. They're all any of those. So those are some typical triggers associated with maladaptive behavior for them. Moving on, let's see. to pause this. Here we go. We're back. Hi. Okay, so let's move on. Now that we've learned some of these maladaptive behaviors and some triggers, some displayed behaviors, I would like to do an activity where you guys kind of practice the idea of it. It's very important because in order to apply the effective interventions, we have to know like what's causing the maladaptive behavior. So this is a good little practice for that. So I will be handing out cards for maladaptive, and if you read this backwards, maladaptive behaviors, as well as cards that have triggers for those maladaptive behaviors. And lastly, cards for displayed behavior. So the idea is to link those respective disciplines together according to the maladaptive behavior that you're working with. So for example, it's a tantrum. What triggered the tantrum? Probably maybe anxiety. Let's say anxiety triggered it. And how did they display that anxiety? They displayed it by hand clapping. So just work with them. Obviously, some of them are interactive. You can do more than one. Get together with 2 or 3 people in groups, and you guys can work together and figure those out. And as we know, with working with children, they love getting treats and rewards for the things that they do. So with that in mind, I will be coming around and looking at the things you guys put together and giving out little treats. There's our treat box, so you guys will get a chance to draw something out of the prize box. So hopefully all of you guys are motivated now to participate. So we'll be doing that. So I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to work on that, and then we'll go over some of those and pick up some treats. Okay, that was fun. You guys all did a great job on those, and I hope you guys all enjoy the treats that you got to pick out of the prize box. We are going to move forward, and we're going to start talking about the ways to figure out what's going on. How do we track this behavior to figure out the triggers and display behavior so we can come up with these effective interventions for the maladaptive behavior? And so one of the tools that is effective for this in a classroom setting especially is the ABC model. And it's a model that's used for charting this behavior. So we're going to give you guys some information on get my notes here. So the ABC behavior is a model of behavior modification that is often used in educational and therapeutic settings with both children and adults. The ABC model falls under the umbrella of applied behavior analysis, ABA, which is based on the work of B.F. Skinner, who is referred to as the father of behaviorism. In Skinner's theory of operant conditioning, he developed a 3-term contingency to shape behavior: that's stimulus, response, and reinforcement. So the ABC model is fashioned after this concept, Webster 2020. It is a tool that is implemented to understand and modify particular behaviors by noting what triggers the behavior and the result of that behavior, 2015. The following video is an example of how to take ABC data. So we'll start that video. Okay, as you can see from the video, ABC analysis gives a great deal of insight into the behavior, helping to provide the needed information in regard to the best approach to handling that behavior. By observing each of the models, helping professionals are able to gain the data necessary to do functional assessments for the students in their situation. These steps to collect data should be taken every time the behavior occurs in order to look for patterns, and know whether the actions being taken or the changes that are being made for the maladaptive behavior are effective. Pratt and Dubey 2008. A major advantage of the ABC model is that it's easy to record, especially like in a classroom setting where it can get a little chaotic, and because the charting is what you observed and it needs to be accurate, it's better if you can do something that's simple so that you can remember it and not forget, and get it done quickly so that you can move on with the rest of your tasks. Another benefit to the ABC model approach is that it is easily translatable to those outside of the original scenario. So for example, the instructional assistant can share observations about the student's behavior with the teacher or the parent in a way that they understand it, even though they weren't there for the initial interaction. So when behavior change is desired, this approach is effective method to implement. And that is, again, Pratt and Dubey 2008. So I am going to give you guys another chance to get inside that prize box. We're going to practice using an ABC chart. There's, as you can see from the video, she said there's like a number of all kinds of charts. And sometimes the teachers or RBTs or whatever, they will make their own charts that unique to their client, their student. I do have the one that we're going to be using today. This one is very simple, a simple form, ABC form chart. I printed two just in case. There's another one here that has more detail for some people might want more. You have your date, your name, stuff like that, but they have like the function and all those things. And sometimes the function, knowing the function of the ABC sequence, as you saw in the video, isn't necessarily necessarily for the person who's taking the data. The team, once you get together with your team, would come together and talk about what was the possible function for that. So you'll have a chart, and you will also be receiving a scenario form where there's going to be 3 scenarios that you will be taking this information and you will be filling in your ABC chart with it and putting the information in the appropriate lines and columns. So that is going to be our second and last activity for today. You guys are going to work as individuals. You'll each have one chart and one scenario form to work with. And I will give you guys about 6.5 minutes to work on those before we come back to working together as a class. Okay, hi guys. All right, now that I've given you some time, we're going to go over how you guys did with your charts. So who would like to share with us what they logged for scenario 1? Hey, Tom, yes. Yep, great, awesome job on that. The scenario that you used for number 1, you did everything was locked complete. That was great. I just have a question for that. What do you think was the function taking place? Although I know I said that we weren't going to do that we typically wouldn't do that part, but just to give you guys an idea of how that works, what do you think is the function for that scenario? Because we're working on different displayed triggers, things like that. Yes, escape is the function for this scenario. So the student there is attempting to avoid or escape the given task. So you may choose out of the box. Have at it. So let's see share one more. So, okay, Tom shared. So Paul, you can share scenario for number 3. What did you do with scenario number 3? Excellent. And notice that he also made sure to record only what was observable on that. And also Tom, he did as well, but I didn't mention that they both recorded on their charts what was observable. You didn't see any information on there, additional information that was their opinion or what they thought the child was thinking or any of those things that aren't relevant to the chart, just what exactly happened and what was seen. So that was very good. And in that scenario, what do you think that could have been the triggers for that? Does anybody have any ideas for that scenario with Samantha where you think they had, what do you think could have possibly triggered her response, her maladaptive response? Sarah. Yes, they're being presented with a non-preferred task could have been the trigger for that, definitely. She clearly didn't want to go up to the board. So yes, that's great answer. And one more, is anybody else? Paul. Yes, absolutely. Anxiety about being in front of the class in her wheelchair definitely could have been, especially, teens don't want to go up to the classroom anyways, but if they have any kind of thing going on, that might trigger some type of anxiety. Yeah, so both of those answers were excellent. Great job. Both of you guys can come up and pick something out of the treasure box. Awesome. So with Samantha's scenario, I would like to lead into a different part of the discussion. It's a perfect, her situation is a perfect example of how important it is to consider the students' personal information that's usually taken during the initial assessment for them, how important that is to their overall learning experience. Although we want to create an environment for our students with ASD that is inclusive, we also want to take in consideration their special needs. So this may include areas of emotional support. It could also be for low self-esteem issues, which is typical for the teenage or adolescent population. And here we can also consider the student's home environment, where what are the values or the beliefs or practices that are shaping how the student, and in this case Samantha, sees themselves. So Corey et al. 2017 suggests that coming to terms with our own personal values helps to create an appreciation for the differing values of others. So for me, I just my personal core values are guided by my faith. And when I'm working with others, I try to keep in mind one of my favorite scriptures that helps me when I'm interacting, and it's from the Psalms. And it says, for you created my innermost being. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and I know that well. I love that scripture. I love every time I read it, it makes me smile because it just reminds me of how precious I am as a person, as a human being, but it also reminds me of how precious everyone is. All of us are unique in our own way. So while working with children with special needs, we must keep in mind that they are like all of us, are wonderfully made, and all of us are unique in our own way, as I said, and our cultural backgrounds play a major role in how we view the world around us. So whatever shapes your values or shapes your way of being will affect the people that you're interacting with, and including your students. And so when we are connected with who we are and what our values are, we're better able to appreciate those of others. And in this case, it's very effective in knowing these things and taking these things into consideration with our students. will help us to be able to create a intervention plans, strategies, and stuff like that that are more effective and more unique, individualized for each student. So just something to keep in mind as you're working with your students. Okay. Nice. So we're narrowing down here to the end of class time of session. So I do have time. There was a lot of information that you guys were listening to. Hopefully you guys will be able to follow along on your note sheets. However, I do have time for one question. I will be available after the lesson for any other additional questions, but for now, I do have time for one more question. Okay, Aiden, yes. That's an excellent question. In our line of work, it can be difficult to avoid dual relationships. Oh, and for you guys who in the back who maybe didn't hear him, Aiden's question centers around the issue of he works with, he has an autistic child that he works with in the classroom setting, and the mom would like for him to come and sit with him at home while she runs her errands. And although Aiden, as he mentioned, wants to do it because he feels like this is something that's needed and he wants to be able to help out, he also realizes that there's definitely like a ethical issue concerns there as far as dual relationship goes. So his question was, what do I think about that, or how would I handle that? And I think I'll answer that with maybe an experience that I had in a conversation wise with a young lady that I interviewed for, as I was researching for learning about ABA therapy. She's a BCBA, which is a board certified behavior analysis. She creates the intervention plans that we RBTs implement. So I was in an interview with her, and the subject of dual relationships did come up. And she generally agrees with the board's decision, the ethical codes of implementing the ethical codes for no dual relationships, to like avoid them, because of the issues that can arise when those lines are blurred between the provider and the client, the student, whatever your situation is. And sometimes the issues that arise are negative things that will outweigh any benefits that could come from it. With that being said, she did say that there are benefits to having a dual relationship. And in Aiden's case, for example, where he's an RBT for his student in the classroom, and the mom would like for him to help, a great way to do this would be to be a respite care provider. So as having that dual role, working with him at home, with the student at home, Aiden is then able to, first of all, one of the benefits is that Aiden already knows his student. So here he's already built a rapport with his student. So, which is very important with children with ASD, because learning to pair with them or to build that rapport with them takes time. And sometimes it could be difficult. So the fact that Aiden already knows the student would make it an easier transition for him to have someone come into the home, because he already knows who he is, which is very important, because children with ASD need consistency. It's very important for them. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is that he is familiar with the protocols to take if Aiden's student was to have a crisis while his mom's running her errands at the store, whatever. And then also another benefit for that would be that he is able to observe his student outside of the classroom and see what his everyday life skills are like. And it would be some additional information that he's observing that he could use to talk with the team about some maybe modifications or whatever for his intervention plan that he sees that could work both at home and at school. So in this case, the dual relationship will work and benefit the students. So Aiden, I hope that answered your question, and I hope that was enough information for you to come up with your own decision on that. Good luck with that. And that was definitely a great question. Okay, so now we're about to wrap up. Last week and the following weeks, and of course today, I would like to give you guys some resources that are relevant to the lesson for this week. And so for this week's lesson, that would look like Autism Speaks. So Autism Speaks is a wonderful national website for information. It's autism awareness, the science behind it, behind the treatment plans for it, and advocacy for different programs for children with and adults with autism. The website provides a comprehensive resource guide for all states. And the organization is dedicated to promoting solutions across the spectrum, as well as throughout the lifespan for those individuals with autism and their families. So you can find the services, contracts, resources, all those things in your specific area on their website, which is www.autismspeaks.org. And by the way, I will have handouts for the resources that you guys can take with you as you leave. The other resource that I thought would be great for this week is the National Association of Special Education. And this organization is dedicated to ensuring that all children and adolescents with special needs receive the best education possible. Their goal is to enhance the professional practice for teachers of special education, building public support for high quality, special education programs. So the site provides resources for teachers and families, such as behavior and discipline issues with students, for students with ASD, and then apps to teach social skills for students with ASD, which is very important, as well as information on ABA therapy. So there's like a plethora of resources within the site, articles that you could read, all kinds of things. So as I said, there's a leaflet that I printed out for you guys, so you guys can take one as you leave to add to your resources to help provide to your students and their families. That being said, I just want to thank you guys for being here today and learning about triggers and the maladaptive behaviors that are linked to them. This information is so important and relevant to the intervention process, which we will be talking about next week. So with that being said, I will definitely be here for about 10 minutes after this class to answer any questions, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you.